So today I am reading through and responding to comments on some other videos I've had, and I do comment, so please comment below and I would love to get into a conversation with you. But I'm reading this one comment. This person is telling me about suddenly being pulled into a meeting and being put on a PIP. She's barely been at the company a month, and suddenly her boss is pulling her in and ambushing her with this PIP. Here's the kicker. Her boss hasn't written the PIP yet. She comes totally unprepared and basically tells the employee, you're not meeting expectations and I'm going to be putting you on a PIP. And here's what actually makes my mind want to explode. She wants the employee's help in writing the PIP. I cannot tell you what a pathetic example of leadership. I shouldn't even use the word leadership. This person is leader in name only. I have no words. The employee basically was saying, you know, this has eroded all the trust I have with this leader. You think? I'm now looking for another job, all the thing. I've seen it so many times, it shouldn't even faze me anymore. Nothing should surprise me yet. Every time I think I've heard it all, here is another example, and this is a perfect one. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about, are you being set up to fail? And clearly, my friend from the comments was being set up to fail, and no good was going to come from this, and she's absolutely right to be activating a job search. So we're going to be talking about, are you being set up to fail, and what warning signs to look for. Now, they do look similar, these warning signs, and I'll get to them in a second. From other things like, are you being quiet fired? Are you just being fired in general? But we're still going to break it down in context of being set up to fail. And I've also got a Reddit story for you that we're going to look into. And again, it leaves me shaking my head just reading it. We're going to give you some tips on how to deal with this situation and what you can do to, come out of it as unscathed as possible. So if you find yourself being left out of meetings, being assigned impossible tasks with unrealistic timelines, and you're being told constantly, you're not meeting expectations, we have a performance problem, you might not just be struggling, you might be being set up to fail. It is such a horrible place to be in. You almost always can't recover from it because it's an uphill battle and you're fighting against all this constant stuff. And you have no way to combat it because you don't know what's coming next. You're just being told it's not enough. You're not meeting expectations. I've worked in HR so many years. Just when I think it all, I've seen it all, I go onto Reddit and am completely shocked at what I read. Or now I'm just looking at the comments to my own videos and still I am left aghast at what I am reading. Okay, so the first thing on my list of signs you're being set up is that you're given unrealistic expectations seemingly from out of the blue. So suddenly all this work is piling up and nothing's being adjusted with your manager, because a good manager will actually, if they're giving you more work that's more priority, will sit down with you and say, hey, let's reprioritize what's on your plate so your deliverables are manageable. But if they're just piling it on and saying, nope, you've still got to make the deadlines and all the things, then you may have a problem on your hands. They may be giving you that in an effort to set you up for failure to manage you out of the organization. Now, why would a manager do this? 9 times out of 10, if you're doing all you can, right, and you're controlling everything you can and you're accountable for your successes and your failures, that's great. But the manager, they could have other things in mind, right? They may want somebody, maybe they've inherited you as an employee. They may want their own person in that job. So, their devious mind now has said, oh, we'll make Sue's life absolutely miserable and just give her so much work and set her up for failure so that she resigns, and then I can, backfill her with my choice. I've seen that movie before, and if you're Sue, no matter how many hours you put in, it's never going to be good enough. You put in 100 hours a week and you actually get all that stuff done. Next week, you know what you're going to come into? Double that amount of work. And maybe that's a little extreme, but that's the scenario that will continue to play out because, Sue, you are not going to succeed in this manager's eyes. And so what can you control in this situation? Well, we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes. But let's go on to some other warning signs that you may encounter with respect to that you're being set up for failure. So the next one is, the feedback is just not great. It's vague or it's constantly shifting, right? So that you think, okay, I got this feedback on, say, my communication skills as an example, right? So I've worked on that, and the next time I come in for my performance evaluation or a check-in or whatever it is, you're like, hey, I'm going to do great. I close that gap. Well, then it's always something else, right? Okay, great, you did this, but here's the real issue, right? So it's always this pile on effect. They're shifting the goalpost, right? I think that's a sports metaphor, and I'm not a sports guy, and now I'm probably going to cut this out. Anyway, so they keep shifting what success looks like, and you're never going to get over that line and stay there in their eyes. And so every time you come in for a performance check-in, it's almost demoralizing because you come in with high hopes, and then you walk out with your tail between your legs because you're still being told that all that effort that you put in to make a change was for naught because now we've got this other list of stuff that you need to work on. The next item on my list, again, this could be applicable for anything, whether it's being you're quiet fired, whether it's being, this is a sign that you're going to be managed out of the organization and just fired. But this one is applicable here about being set up for failure is because now the conduit of information for you to do your job successfully is slowly coming to a close. You're being excluded from meetings or decisions that directly impact your work. I had a mentor back at Starbucks who I still keep in touch with this day. And she gave me this, I was struggling with something, and she gave me this advice one day because I was comparing myself to somebody else in the organization, which don't do. It's always, it's never a good thing to wrap your brain around that. Focus on what you can control. But I digress. I was comparing myself to somebody else, and she's like, Rob, they're not actually smarter than you. They just have better access to more information than you do. So I then had to shift my thinking into, okay, I need that information. How can I go about getting that? And I put a plan into place. So if you find yourself in this situation where you're being excluded from meetings or decisions or whatever it is that directly impacts the stuff that you're accountable for, find a way to get yourself either back in those meetings or get that information so that you can actually do the job you've been asked to do in the time frame you've been asked to complete it. And kind of carrying that point a little bit forward is if you have been removed from key projects without any reason, right? They don't, you're going along, you're leading a project, and all of a sudden, bam, you're pulled out of the mix. What's that about? You can't still be held accountable for that, because I've seen this story many times is where shifting priorities or whatever it is will happen. And then you come to performance evaluation time, and that priority is still sitting on your goals. If you find yourself stuff being pulled off your plate, you better work with your manager to say, okay, I want to make sure we adjust my annual goals if that's being reassigned to somebody else. And based on that conversation, you should get a really good clue as to is your manager is trying to set you up for failure. And then the last sign, this is kind of a ginormous red flag. It's if you've been assigned to a project that is pretty much a sinking ship, that no good will come from it. It's this hot potato project that has bounced around to amongst multiple people, and suddenly it's been thrown on your desk because nobody else wants it, or your manager's just like, look, I'm going to give you're expendable. I'm going to give this to you. If you fail, that just fits my narrative, and I'm going to manage you out of the organization. So if you get assigned to that project, either do all you can to dig in and actually you're the one to bring that home because that's a great story, or here's a big red flag that this is just an untenable, unrealistic workplace, and you're just never going to get to that point of success. And if you accept that and that's where you are, still dig in and do your job, but you know what I'm going to say, work on that plan B, work on that exit strategy, whether internally or externally, because I think even if you were a success, 9 times out of 10 on that sinking ship project, if you were a success, your boss is going to still find a way to ding you for it and say you weren't a success, even if you've met every single deliverable. There's always going to be this, yeah, all that's great, but I really wanted this. So it could be a no-win situation for you. So why would companies or leaders do this? Now, there's no, okay, could this happen? Sure. But I've never seen where people are like in a company, in a leadership meeting, say, okay, we are going to set people up for failure. We want to clean house, but we don't want to pay severance and all the things. So I want you to go out and put unrealistic, expectations on people. Nobody's going to say that out loud. Could it be? Sure. Maybe it's said behind closed doors and everything to put people on pips and all that type of stuff. And many times, the bottom line is we don't want to pay out severance. So if we terminate people by holding them accountable or seemingly holding them accountable, then that's going to save us some money in the long run, right? That we've actually performance managed people out. Maybe that's a good strategy. I think it's a longer strategy, and it's not going to yield the same results as if you just said, hey, we're going to do a reduction in force and manage people out and give them some severance. I don't think keeping people on payroll that you're going to manage out for 3 months is going to save you any money. It's probably going to come out the same in the wash. So if you know that they're not going to be here, just manage them out and give them a severance package. But I don't think that's the overall reason for people being set up for failure. What I actually think is the main reason is it's more on the team level, and it's a function of that leader. It's either their ego, it's either office politics, or they want to replace you where it doesn't come back on them. So they can look at you and say, I gave this person all the coaching I did. This is going to be the narrative between themselves and HR and their leaders, and say, I did everything I could to make this person successful, but they weren't successful. So we're going to manage them out. Or that's why they quit. That's going to be the talk track, because the data they're leaving out is that they put so much pressure on you to actually perform and get and exceed expectations in an unrealistic environment that it caused you to quit. That's what really happened. It's just them. They're the reason. It's their ego, it's their insecurity, whatever it is. It's funny. I read another comment on one of my videos where somebody actually delivered, and they actually made their management look bad because they used some disruptive tactics in a manufacturing environment to actually exceed expectations, exceed quotas, or whatever the metric was. And they got managed out of the organization because their leader was so insecure that they didn't come up with this idea. They couldn't handle having a high performer on their team that was actually better than they were. So their ego couldn't take it, and the person that actually over-delivered suffered for it and had to go find another job. Fast forward, that person's actually in a better environment now, so that's a good story. But it didn't have to be that way. If you're a leader and you've got high performers on your team, hire people that are smarter than you. That's one lesson I learned, and I led a lot of people that were infinitely smarter than I was. Because I could put them together with other people, develop them onto bigger things, and then they also developed other people on my team. So it didn't all fall on me to be the smartest person in the room. If that was the case, it would have been a bad story. Let's just put it that way. So going back to your manager is, at the end of the day, they want you to initiate the exit. They want you to leave voluntarily. It might be their ego, so they're the one in the threat state, and this is how they're acting out. That what can they control? They can make you look bad and pile all the work on you, so you actually have no hope of actually achieving the goal. And this is a strategy disguised as performance management. So on paper, it looks like here are the goals. Rob didn't meet them, and ergo, we are going to manage him out of the organization. That's how the narrative is, but there's some missing details in there that the goals were not smart. They weren't measurable, time-bound, or any of that stuff. They were unrealistic, and at the end of the day, Rob had no hope of achieving them. Okay, so let's get into the Reddit story and give you a real example of something that is actively happening right now. Now, I'm not going to redo the whole thing. I'm going to read key highlights from it, but I am going to flash it up on the screen, so follow along with me. So, is my boss setting me up to fail, and should I quit is the question. Spoiler alert, these people in the comments are absolutely advocating for this person to quit. So they recently started a new job, not unlike the commenter in my on my other video I told you about earlier. And I like the company and the people that interviewed me, but my manager is absolutely awful, and it fills me with dread talking to her. Again, we've talked about Sunday scaries before. This poor girl has it in spades because I can empathize with the amount of dread that she feels just on a daily basis, just going into work, that she doesn't interact with her boss. But let's get back to the story. She's constantly condescending and gets mad when I have difficulty understanding the company. So I'm pretty scared to talk to her and dread interacting with her at all. What a horrible experience for a new employee. The manager should be showing them the ropes, showing them how the company culture works, what success looks like in the culture. This stuff gets me mad, but let's go back to the story. So I'm the only person on her team. Everyone else has a coworker and other managers, and they're super nice, super helpful, and have fun at work. My manager is constantly mad and obsessed with performance. So there's constant accusing me of not understanding anything, of not proving my worth. Yesterday, to my face, she said, I need to prove to my boss that you're an asset. Like, what a toxic way of forcing me to be on the edge, and so early on. I don't have any other coworkers and I don't feel supported at all. She constantly makes me stupid for not understanding processes she's basically just made up in her head. There's no documentation or rhyme or reason. I'm expected to guess how she thinks. She literally makes me feel so incompetent that I want to quit only a month on. I talked to another manager and she said to take things easy and not be so hard on myself. And I'm thinking of approaching her again, saying I can't work for my current manager anymore. They're constantly losing people at this company, and the team has more to lose if I leave versus making me work for a boss who makes me feel like a nervous wreck. What should I do? Am I stupid? I feel so worthless and dumb right now. So again, the prevailing opinion here is that, hey, it's not you. And I believe it, right? I think there should be, a lot of accountability on the employee's part, right? To say, am I actually performing the job I've been asked to, and is there anything I could do better? So I'm a big fan of personal accountability and not just blaming. In this scenario, this is a new employee, and talk about being set up for failure. The manager's actually hoarding information that this employee could need to be successful, and then gaslighting her and basically saying, you're the one with the problem. This is a toxic environment, and I don't see it getting any better unless somebody finally above this person's manager sees that this is going on and either holds that manager accountable or manages them out of the organization. Because somebody who's only been there a month, they barely know how to find the bathroom at that point, right? You've got to have a strategic onboarding process and set people up for success such that they can take that ball and run with it. This person wasn't even in the right ball field to let alone have the ball and running with it. So this is a no-win situation. And again, I agree with the comments to this post that it's not you. You need to take care of yourself, take care of your mental health, take care of, what can you do with your energy, right? You can do enough to keep the wheels on the bus, so to speak, in the interim to, get that job done. But I would also be trying to find another job elsewhere within the organization or external, because this does feel like you're in a no-win situation. So what should the person who commented on my video, this person we just heard from in Reddit, what should they do in this situation, right? The first thing is, and I know I've talked about this, I actually had another commenter say that, oh, Rob, you tell us to document everything. So you basically have to be OCD to succeed in this environment. I don't know if you have to be OCD per se, but documenting everything is going to, if you ever get down the road where you are in a court of law or you're trying to speak to somebody in the organization from, an investigatory standpoint, having receipts, and I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but having documentation about what went on along the way will actually give you more credibility in the eyes of somebody doing an investigation. So think about the documentation that way. Is it a pain in the ass? 100%. Is it tedious? And is it more work that you actually have to do from a CYA perspective? Sure. But it could pay off down the road and get somebody to actually take you seriously if you are in a situation where you're, say, talking to HR and voicing your concerns. Which actually, that brings me to another thing about what you can do. You can leverage HR at this point. You're not in the situation where you're on a PIP or seen as a bad performer yet. So if you go into HR, two things I would say is bring the receipts that you have. And that also helps you keep your, if you're nervous about talking to the HR person or whatever it is, the notes that you have keeps you on track when you're talking to them, right? So you don't walk out of there going, oh, I just met with Rob and I forgot to say X, Y, or Z, right? So your notes are actually going to help keep you on track. But be careful what you say to HR. And I'm saying this, I want you to tell HR fully what's going on, but know something. If I become aware, if I'm your HR person, we're talking about this, right? If I become aware of something that is breaking company policy, is breaking a law from, say, a harassment perspective, I have no choice but to act. Even if you say, Rob, I'm going to tell you this, but I don't want you to do it. Okay, you can say that, but I have no choice. I am bound. I am obligated to go look into something. So this could be this situation, right? You come to talk about your manager to get some advice. You tell me, they're treating me differently based on X, Y, or Z status or whatever it is. I've got to go look into that. And I know just by the sheer fact that I'm sticking my nose in there as an HR person, I'm doing an investigation or whatever it is, could make the situation that much more worse for you. It's going to be awkward, all the things. Now, I'm saying this to you not to dissuade you from talking to HR. I think you should leverage HR. I'm a huge fan of that scenario. I just am trying to be realistic with you. So you know that when that happens, I've got to go run and do something, because I don't want to be in a scenario where you say, hey, I let the company know, and in the form of my conversation with Rob in HR, and he didn't do anything about it. That puts the company at more risk. And I know what you're thinking, Rob. HR is always on the side of the company, not in the employee. And while sometimes I agree with that sentiment, oftentimes if I'm in that scenario, I'm actually thinking about both sides of this equation. I'm trying to protect the company from a risk mitigation standpoint. I'm also advocating for you who's sitting in front of me, talking about some challenges you have in the workplace. Because if this is happening to you, it's happening to other people too. So consider that when you think about, oh, do I want to talk to HR or not? It's probably happening to somebody else as well. The other thing you can do when it comes to working with your manager and you've got all these new expectations, make sure you're getting it in writing, right? Because that's another way they will gaslight you. They will say, they'll give you all this extra work to do, and then it'll be, you push back or something. They're like, oh, that's not what I said. You misunderstood. So get it in writing, recap your meetings in email. Again, I know it's tedious, but it holds that manager accountable too, and then gives you more documentation should you need it in other avenues, whether you're talking to HR or whatever it is. So make sure if you have a conversation with your boss, whatever you align on in that meeting, just shoot them an email back. And it actually makes you show up well too. To a good leader, you're just saying, hey, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. This is what my takeaways were from our meeting, X, Y, and Z. And then they say yes, and everybody's on the same page. But if it's a situation like this where you're trying to make sure that you're holding them accountable, because from a workload perspective, make sure you're documenting it back to them. That's an invaluable tool for you. What you can do is, and you've heard me say it before, I can't help you, boss, but I can help me. And I'm going to go help me by starting a job search. And I think that is healthy. Now, don't spend every day, looking for a new job and all day, every day, right? Because you just still want to make sure that even if you're being set up for failure, you're still trying your best to accomplish those goals you've been given, but you're working on a job search over here. So you have a plan B to activate whenever you need it. And then by all means, I'm a huge proponent of the Employee Assistance Program, or EAP. Most companies have it available to you, and it is confidential. I've heard a lot of employees say, well, Rob, the company, offers this to me, so that's going to get back to my boss. No. So if you seek out professional, counseling advice or even legal advice via EAP, they're all bound by those ethics with those professions, and they're not going to then report back to your boss. So I feel confident that you can be very vulnerable with these people, but my overarching message here is protect your mental health. So if it's not EAP to seek some guidance or counseling from, maybe it's through your healthcare provider or whatever it is. Make sure you're protecting your mental health, because when you're in the middle of this and everything's going on, I talk about the Sunday scaries, but it's a lot more than that. It's every night that you're like, I can't even sleep because I'm so dreading going to deal with Sheila in work every day. And she's just going to be at my desk with her, looking down her nose at me, all condescending. And why haven't you done this? And I told you to do it tomorrow, and da 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 da. It's absolutely maddening to the point you can't even focus on one of the items on your to-do list, let alone all 20. So at the end of the day, if any of this sounds familiar to you, if you can relate to whether it's the person who commented on one of my videos or the person we heard from in Reddit, you're not alone. It's probably not you, and you just need to have the wherewithal to pick yourself up and figure out, again, what can you control in this situation and how are you going to get out of it? Whether it's actually doing all the work that they're actually asking you to do and making a liar out of them and saying, you set me up for failure, but I still knocked it out of the park, or it is working on that plan B. And I think that people are pushed out of organizations every day. It's happening right now to millions of people around the world or whatever it is. I think it's one of the cruelest things you can do to somebody. If you're a leader and you're not actively trying to, one thing I always taught myself and told the leaders that I worked with was, I want to go home every night and put my head down on my pillow knowing that I did everything I personally could to make the people on my team that I'm accountable to and responsible for, make them as successful as they can be. That will make me sleep good at night. These people we're talking about that are setting you up for failure, they are diabolical. They're not doing those things. They don't care about your success. They only care about themselves, their ego, their politics, what's happening above them. That's what they care about. So if they're setting you up for failure, again, it's largely about them. You are not powerless. You can prepare, protect, and pivot into something better. And who knows? You could look back and be interviewing for another job, and some of these scenarios could be really good interview answers, right? You've been asked a question, what's the hardest thing you've had to deal with in the workplace? I've got a story for you. Now, you've got to tee it up and make sure it makes sense to answer the question. And you don't want to badmouth another boss, but you can say, hey, I've been put under unrealistic expectations in the past, and here's what I did. I worked with my boss or whatever it is, and I came out smelling like a rose. That's a great story, and everybody loves a person who is able to overcome adversity or a lot of work to a point of success. So there could be a silver lining in there. This could be a great developmental opportunity for you. If you do like this content, I'd be absolutely honored if you would like this video and subscribe to my channel. And just stay strong, look for another job. There are better organizations. And if you're in this situation, the grass probably is greener on the other side or outside of the organization you're currently in. So until next time, again, my name's Rob, and take care. This video was recorded and produced by Just Talk Studios, the premier video podcasting studio in Bellevue, Washington. Visit justtalkstudios.com to learn more and book your session today.